Celebrating making the first little experiment with the new machine. Hello there. This is Ash Wanders from Blackheath, from Sydney, from Bondi, from Melbourne, from planet Earth, from my mother's. In essence, this is a bit of a producer's video log. It's a spontaneous idea. Let me just remove that. Something I was just tucking into. I have no idea what I'm going to do. But I'll give you a bit of a look at the studio. So I have two studios, or at least two that I can think of that I use. One of them I'm filming this on, and it's an iPad with GarageBand, and it's quite confronting that I've spent over the years probably about $30,000 on. You could say it's a home studio. I believe it's a pro studio. It now has 24-bit 96 kilohertz recording capacity, 48 track, 24 tracks simultaneous recording, all that kind of gear. But, if I want to produce something, because it's just me, doing it, and I'm not going to be jumping on the drum kit needing, however many tracks, separate tracks, and I'm not jamming with anybody. If it's that type of composition, then I'm going to jump on GarageBand on an iPad, because there is nothing, you could be an inbred with an axe put through your head and you could make a great track on that. Like, you can be a complete Dumbo musically and in every other way, and you'd probably make something that's quite accessible. And there are reasons for that. Like, there's lots of sort of preset hoo-ha on there. Kind of lots of little 2 to 8 bar motifs, grooves that you can just stitch together and, drop and paste. But I don't make music much on GarageBand in that way. I do things like play a real kit, not a real kit, a virtual kit on the screen, and then I'll quantize it, and I play on screen keys on the iPad, on screen bass. I'll make a sample and I'll play that, and I'll do a vocal, and I might be on a train when I do the vocal. And things like that. And a track is born, and there are tracks of mine on YouTube that are done wholly and solely in transit on GarageBand on an iPad. And so, as I say, it's quite confronting that really a studio that I've spent 30 grand on, well, my present home studio, one that I can walk around in, it's kind of like a third incarnation of my home/pro studio. And yet, in many ways, it's just replaced overnight with a GarageBand program on an iPad, if you know what you're doing. So I'm going to cut now to showing you what I've got, what sort of yummy things I've got going on in the actual studio. If anyone's interested, here we go. So there's lots of knickknacks. I'll just scan around. There's, samplers and Korg keyboards and, tasty analog mixers and 24 tracks. A nice big 24 track mixer, a 16 track standalone thing, and nice TC Electronics stereo reverb. That's kind of a bit of a latest edition thing. A really rare synth module called an MKS50, and the controller thing for that, PG300. I've got my electronic kit, which is incredibly real. It's an entry-level V-drums, which is really good. It's as good as you want it to be. It's good enough, and you pay something close to nothing for it, really, these days, about $700. And then I've got, pretty much, the entry-level Pearl kit. It's a Pearl Forum with the cymbal that came with it and the hats that came with it, and a floor tom that I liked from another kit. Big old sort of thuddy jazz type bass drum that I don't put a pillow in. I like it the way it is. Got some studio monitors, can't remember really what they are, but they're powered. And they're average, and they're not overly flattering, and so I like them for that reason. This is an QY70. I had a QY22 for a while that I did everything on, and this is like another replacement, bit of nostalgia for replacing that. This, in a way, is not a pride and joy, but it's the way I'm going. It's kind of like it's just an interim mixing console, but really, this is the sort of old school dimension of the new school thing. I can put everything into there, and then it will go down to this monster, which is a 24-bit 96 kilohertz 24 track, 24 in, 24 out. So once I go in to that, I can then rewire everything, go out of that, back into this beast, shove some TC Electronics reverb on it, and pump it out through these babies. And if I like what I hear, I can just go out of the outs of that and down to one of these, which essentially is what I will master it down to, is just the capture, like a 24-bit 48 capture. And then I can always parallel master that, take it to my PC computer and, parallel master it in something as basic as Audacity. And that's the studio. Oh, there's also a MIDI keyboard, which I play that vintage synth with those controllers. If you haven't guessed already, I don't really go in for creating on a computer program, even though this main beast here is an interface. That is, it can intersect with your computer, and you can run, say, I can't think of the programs, but all the obvious ones with this. It can also be used by itself, and I think to myself, why not? If you don't mind looking at small screens, then look at small screens. This also has a small screen, and as many of the units do, this keyboard does, so does that keyboard. Why not? I don't really care. I can always get the torch out and have a look. And to me, it simplifies things, believe it or not. And then for mastering or layering or adding a few extra tracks in, I will, use a computer. My first multi-track ever really was a Roland VS880, which was just a digital 8-track. Here I've got what I use as my guitar setup. Roland sampling pedal, a Zoom, pretty good. I'm quite happy with the sound of that thing. A Digitech and a Roland thing. I was using that quite a bit there. The Roland, I like this thing now, the Zoom. And I make music sometimes almost exclusively with this looping pedal and really enjoy that. The last bit of gear, there's all my leads, see, very organised. I've got a keyboard, it's a Korg. And it just has predictable sounds, previously owned by Sally Street, who became Sally London, and she gave it to me. A bit of a pop star in her own right, and she's a lawyer. Always good to know a few lawyers. And yeah, it does what it does. It's got a very warm, vintagey kind of sound. It's very old and secondhand, but it works just fine. And that is my bloody studio. At the moment it's kind of toasty warm in here because I've got a nice oil heater. And there's the prayer flags. I can't remember who gave these prayer flags to me, but I put them in the right spot, I believe, in the studio where this whole place is a bit blessed to be. And there's a photograph of me singing at the Gearens Hotel, trying to look a bit like David Bowie.